core for business survival. The blood is cash, right? And so figure out where you can get your cash or an equivalent. If you have a line of credit and it hasn't already been yanked, then get that money out of there and put it in another bank.
This is the Construction Leading Edge podcast from constructionleadingedge.com. My name is Todd DeWalt. It's my job to help you as the construction business owner and leader maximize profits and eliminate chaos in your business. Here's what you're going to get out of this interview with my good friend Spencer Padgett. He is a longtime home builder and now the builder in residence for a software company that helps builders and remodelers all over the world organize their business. And Spencer has the unique perspective to be able to talk to people from all over the country. He knows more builders and remodelers and contractors than possibly anybody that I know. So that gives him the unique perspective to know what they're dealing with. He was also a builder himself, and he has gone through some recessions and dealt with a few crises of his own. So here's what you're going to get out of this podcast interview. You're going to find out some tips on how to bulletproof your business. You're going to learn about how to hard target for failure. We'll find out some of the destructive behaviors that you want to avoid if things aren't going well with your business right now. There's a couple of lessons that you may want to listen to, a couple of things that you want to do to help mitigate the risk of this recession, even if things seem to be going really well. And we'll talk about some of the things that nobody else is talking about, some of the fundamental baseline things that are key to surviving this, not only as a business, but as an individual. A lot of good stuff in this conversation. It's always a privilege and a pleasure to talk with Spencer. I think you're going to get a lot out of this. I have a couple of resources that I want to share with you before we get into that interview. Here we go. Let's talk about your bookkeeping for a moment. Are you tired of having inaccurate, incomplete, and confusing books? Are you tired of paying people to help you with your accounting, but not actually getting any useful information? Let me tell you about the Apparatus team. I've worked with them for a few years, and the Apparatus team specializes in one thing and one thing only: transforming your bookkeeping from a, quote, necessary evil and a source of confusion and chaos into a powerful tool that will allow you to grow a profitable contracting business. Think about this. What would you do if you didn't have to do your own books? Would you sell more work? Would you train your people? Maybe spend more time on your boat or in your tree stand? And what if you actually had good information, good accounting information that gave you some visibility into what's going on? Well, here's what the Apparatus team does. They will take whatever bookkeeping you have in place today and completely transform it into the powerful tool that you need to grow your business. So when you become an Apparatus client, they're going to equip you and your growing contracting business with a bookkeeping, reporting, and a payroll system that does 5 things. 1, it's structured. Number 2, it's accurate. Number 3, it's up to date. Number 4, it's clear, giving you useful reports that you can make decisions based on. And number 5, it's accessible. You'll have 24/7 access to all of your books at any time. So if you've had enough of the bookkeeping administrative treadmill or nightmare, and you're ready to have a bookkeeping, payroll, and reporting capability that's going to be the foundation of your successful business, then the Apparatus team is the specialized solution that you've been looking for. To set up a call with the Apparatus team and find out more about how they can help you get rid of your bookkeeping headaches, go to constructionleadingedge.com/headache. One other thing I want to mention is an issue that I hear from contractors on a weekly basis. They tell me things like, Todd, we're busier than ever. I have more work in backlog. I have more employees, but we're not making the money we should, or we're making less money than we have when we had less work, or we're actually losing money. And I'll cut right to the chase. The problem is profit bleeds. There's plenty of profit in the projects, but that profit is bleeding out through a variety of ways. And what you need to do, if that's you, is you need to identify those profit bleeds and then put systems in place to eliminate the profit bleeds. If that sounds familiar to you, if you are losing profit, if you feel like profit is bleeding out of your projects, go back and listen. I want to tell you about two things. One, go back and listen to episode 156, where I walk through 8 profit bleeds that cause really busy contractors to lose money. Secondly, if that's you and you're concerned about that and you want to put together a plan to eliminate those profit bleeds, then let's set up a free strategy call. I would love to get on the phone with you, walk through some of those profit bleeds, and help get you started mapping out a plan to eliminate those profit bleeds. All you need to do is go to my website, constructionleadingedge.com, push the red button that says schedule a free call, and we'll get on a call, talk through those profit bleeds, and help you put together an action plan to stop that bleeding. Now, without any further ado, here is my conversation with Spencer Padgett. Enjoy. All right, I'm here with my good friend Spencer Padgett, and we're going to talk about several things today. But first of all, Spencer, how are things going in your part of the world?
Well, Todd, we're busy. I'm in Maryland, and I am in my house. I've been in my house for, I think, at least 5 weeks now. I think we're going on. CoConstruct went work from home pretty early, and which is great because we're an internet company. But been having a good time with the boys. They know not to stream anything when Dad's on a podcast.
Same here.
We've been playing horse out on the basketball hoop and wearing face masks when we have to go out to the grocery store, which is new for everybody. So, but can't complain. We're busy at CoConstruct, still releasing a bunch of stuff and literally just on the phone all day long with a ton of builders, helping them through what's going on.
Yeah, definitely lots going on, uncharted waters. So there are several buckets of things I want to talk about with you, since you have the opportunity and the somewhat rare perspective that comes from working with builders from all over the country and multiple countries, seeing people from everywhere across the spectrum of the lockdown and the coronavirus recession, if we want to call it that, that's going on right now. Everything from completely locked down, shelter in place, businesses at a standstill, to the other end of the spectrum where in some cases people are busier than ever. So we want to talk about that. So let's start with this. Let's talk about people are wondering, what do I do next? What do I do now? So if just talk about that. Where are you seeing people? What are the different categories that people, when I say people, I mean builders and contractors of all sorts, are in right now due to what's going on with the coronavirus? Then let's talk about what should they be doing? What should they be prepared for next? And when we prepped for this, the analogy I used was, like, I've never run a marathon before. So I would be curious to know, at what point should I expect to hit the wall, and what's that like? So for folks who haven't gone through a recession already, lucky for them, what should they expect based on where they're at?
Yeah, it's a good series of things to unpack. The first one is that I do see so many builders in so many different situations right now. Everything from all of New Zealand completely shut down. Builders just kind of like, hey, we're all in the same boat. Send us some courses, tell us what we need to work on, and we're going to sharpen our saw. To Pennsylvania is very unfortunate. Many builders there have been shut down since the very beginning. Same kind of they're trying to get waivers approved. I've got one builder I spoke to last week who demoed a house. The first and second floor, the family moved into their finished basement, and their kids came home from college, and then everything shut down. And so they have a house completely demoed except for the basement. The family's stuck in the basement with all their extended family now home, and the state just turned down their waiver to complete work. But then you have Texas, and I talk to people in Boston and talk to people in California, and they're all in various stages of being shut down or trying to figure out what's happening, or even, really honestly, many people are past figuring out how to handle their job sites. They've done that in the last 2 weeks, and they're now just trying to operate within the new normal. Even the folks that are completely open and continuing to work are still making sure that they're following the CDC's best practices and making sure that they're not putting people at risk, because unlike 2008, 2009, 2010, however long that lasted for folks, uh, it's not just money you could lose here. There's this underlying risk that you could get someone sick, that they could die, that something bad could happen. And it goes both ways. You could send an employee who gets sick, or you could send an employee who is sick that gets a client sick, or a trade partner. So there's all kinds of fierce unknown risks here that people are dealing with, and it's like the new norm. And I think that it's going to shape what we have coming. Now, what are all the people doing? What's next? I think that people have come to this baseline realization that nothing's ever going to be quite the same when they move into next, right? And so next will be defined by what they're in right now, right? So we have the people whose revenue has dropped. We have people whose projects have gone out. They're dealing with a different next than people who are cruising along and have maybe lost one and gained one, and they're still able to work. And that's a different next than the people who are actually accelerating, that they've signed more agreements and they're continuing to work. So, but all in all, everyone realizes that fundamentally moving forward, if the dice were rolled again and the people that are able to work weren't, they have to have a plan. Everyone sees it and recognizes that when the next shoe drops, whatever it is, whether it's weather, sickness, economic, whatever could happen, they need to have a really solid plan in place and be able to pivot to meet it. A plan that covers not just their business operations, but how do you talk to your customers? How do you talk to your team? How do you talk to your clients? So many builders haven't seen this before and are scrambling to put that narrative together. And I think that you'll find there's whole packages and whole conversations and webinars and speeches at IBS this coming year that'll be about just this, crisis management in construction. And I think many people are kind of gearing up for their own individual piece of that before they move into whatever is next. I can't predict what's next, but that's my take on it.
Yeah. So let's look at a couple of different categories of three different situations for the people who are shut down and they are in the midst of a recession and their business is really struggling right now and they're not sure if they'll have a business when things open back up. What should they be looking at right now? What do you think? Obviously, this is not legal advice. You're not a doctor. You don't play one on TV. But what do you think folks should be looking at? What's your suggestion on what's next for those people?
Well, Todd, I can tell you, from personal experience, having been through those or walked a few miles in those exact shoes, having to stare at myself in the mirror every morning, wondering those same things, that, it's kind of like when your body goes into shock, all the blood goes to your core and you protect the core. And it's that same way with your business. I found in the last downturn that my focus leading into the downturn was my business and putting everything in it and making sure that it was going to be successful. And as the downturn started to crush and collapse the outer, bands of the business, I started to come back into what was really important, which was my family. Okay, are we going to be okay? Am I going to be able to keep my house? Am I going to be able to pay for groceries as these knives are falling all around me? And the folks that are in that position that are waiting for a PPP to come in, maybe have applied for the EIDL, and whether they get that or not is going to depend on whether they can keep their business open. You have to go into the core. You have to immediately conserve cash, hoard it like there's no tomorrow. Immediately reach out to all of your liabilities, short, medium, long term, negotiate where you can, get your leases down, get your equipment, your trucks, push all of those payments off. And I know I'm speaking to the people out there who've probably already done this. So if you haven't, definitely jump on that. Find out where in your AR that you can squeeze some cash out. It gets to the point where you may say, hey, listen, because we've stopped work on your project, I know you owe us $100,000 now, but we'd like to collect 80,000 of it and keep 20 in reserve in case we're able to open up and buy some materials and get that in, but work with your customers so they feel like they're getting something and they're still providing you with some cash flow. So that's really it. Collapse down under your core. Core for business survival, the blood is cash, right? And so figure out where you can get your cash or an equivalent. If you have a line of credit and it hasn't already been yanked, then get that money out of there and put it in another bank. Sorry if you're a banker listening to that, but that's what you got to do. Take it and put it somewhere so that you have it as at least some dry powder available.
Yeah.
So that's that scenario in my mind.
Yeah, it's really attack your accounts receivable, collect as much as you can. I would say take a look at all of your assets and then liquidate whatever you can that won't kill you. Mm-hmm. Maybe you have equipment. Maybe you have a piece of equipment that's worth $40,000, but you know what? That equipment's going to be completely worthless to you 2 months from now. Maybe you can sell it for 30 or 35 or something. That cash, it's not about profit or getting your cash back out of something. You just need cash to survive. So liquidate assets, turn it into cash, hoard cash, and you're going to have to do some things that you might not be comfortable with, some uncomfortable conversations. But having been through a situation like that myself, I can tell you that those uncomfortable conversations are more comfortable than the fallout from not having those conversations and not doing it.
Tear off the Band-Aid, eat the frog, whatever you want to call it. Be decisive in bad news and act on it so that it doesn't become something that sinks you. Now, let's back up for a second. Like, we're not talking to everybody here right now, right? That's like, it's not the sky falling for everybody. So this is the drastic side where you truly were not ready going into this for an immediate dead stop of cash or projects, and you're scrambling a bit. There's a whole different, broader spectrum to address, though.
Yeah, so let's talk about the folks in the middle of the spectrum where things are still going. Maybe there's been some puts and takes, but they're not in crisis mode, but they're not accelerating. What should they expect next, and what should they be focused on?
I think that they should probably be prepared for some structural changes in the entire market, even if you are still working or working a few of your projects. There are upstream impacts that you're going to start to feel that will impact your business, that will have an effect. And that's not just the lights and the finished pieces that are either on a ship now or hopefully getting to the ports in China or coming over from Italy at some point, those nice finished pieces. But these are things like windows that are manufactured in the US because the plants have been shuttered. They're lumber, long lead lumber items that are stuck in Canada because all of our transportation is going towards mission critical medical stuff right now. There are issues with materials in the supply chain. And so even if you're producing, both of these tiers, the middle and the top tier where people are rocketing forward, you're still going to feel those constraints. So you need to be prepared for that, talking to your customers and making sure that you're adjusting your schedules, especially if you're obligated via contract to hit a scheduled date. The other piece that I would say applies to this tier of contractor and business is to go out and make sure that your social media isn't tone deaf to what's happening right now, and that the social media posts that you're creating, while your area might be in great shape, make sure that you're not appearing to be out of touch with the rest of the world, because even your own clients are being impacted in their own way, whether it be family or their business, by things happening outside of your region. So that empathy in messaging right now is really important.
You bring up a good point. If you have a scheduled date, a deadline in your contract, now's a good time to revisit that. One of the mistakes that I've seen over and over and over is this reluctance to revisit scheduled dates. We want to put on our superhero cape and say, you know what, it's seen as like an admission of failure to ask for more time. And then there's this mindset of, well, we'll just try to bring it in. We'll figure it out. We can make it up. We can make it up. We can make it up. And then by the time here, most contracts, at least in my experience, I'll say this, a lot of contracts have a clause that you have a certain amount of time from a triggering event to request additional time. Yeah. And if you're waiting to see how things shake out, then that window will have passed. So it's always best to request more time. Maybe you don't need it, but I can tell you, having been an owner's rep on a lot of commercial projects, my advice to my contractors was, don't surprise me at the end. I hate surprises. Your clients hate surprises. Bad news early is better than surprise, bad news at the end. So find out what's going on with your suppliers, check your long lead items, check your trade partners. They could be dealing with labor shortages. This will have some effect on scheduled dates. So now's the time to raise that yellow flag, revisit that, reset the expectation, maybe even on pricing. There may be some force majeure type things that are going on here where you have the ability to protect yourself from price increases. So good advice.
That term force majeure, right? Like everyone's always had that in their contract. Now is truly the time when it comes into play, right? Like you have reasons for force majeure right now if you can enforce them. But like you said, if your contract requires that you notify within a certain time frame, like within 2 weeks or 30 days or whatever the typical timing is, make sure that you put a notification out there now that says, hey, we are potentially encountering a force majeure situation under the contract. We are addressing it. We are trying to work solutions, but we want to put you on notice that we feel like this may be a clause that we may have to enforce. So think about that to, be preventative or in advance if you need to.
Definitely. Yeah. What about the third tier, the folks who are suddenly accelerating for whatever reason, the demand has increased and their business is growing? What should they be looking at that maybe is a little more or different from the other two tiers?
Well, the first thing I'll say is the other two tiers, you'll get there, right? I mean, we were under delivering homes and projects as it was before this started. We may have a blip, and I don't think anyone truly knows what's going to happen in the economy, but everyone will get back to a point by nature of the industry that we're in where things will pick up again. For the folks that haven't taken a hitch down or lost, learn the lessons of everybody else right now and figure out a way from a financial perspective to take some money off the table, to take some cash out of the business, maybe put some debt on the business right now where you can take advantage of the EIDL or the PPP, those programs that are out there. Even if it's 2.5 months worth of payroll that you take off the table, you're making the money, put it away. Put it somewhere that no one can touch it or that you won't touch it so that it's there that you can lever against if you need to borrow in the future, or you can use break glass in case of emergency, as they say. So it's time to prep. Right? It's time to prepare for whatever's coming next for you, because let's all face it, no one's immune. No one's listening. If you're making $100 million a year right now and you're rocking and you're 20% higher than you were in 2019, call me. I want to hear about it. But second thing is, you're not that smart. It's going to happen. We're in that business, right? Everyone's either fortunate and fortune and preparation meet for success, and sometimes the fortune part stays back at home. And so just be preparing for, look at the lens that everyone else is seeing through right now and go, if I was in those shoes, what would I be doing with sales? What can I put in the can from a marketing perspective right now? Will I have the resources? How can we, address how we're going to document things that change in our schedules and our contracts based on disasters and things like that? What do my insurance policies look like? What does my banking relationship look like? Who can I lean on if we go into darker, harder times? That's what I would be doing if I was a builder in the fortunate situation of not seeing a reduction right now.
Yeah, that's great advice. And we'll talk about some lessons learned and what are some of those lessons, how to capture some of those lessons in just a moment. But let's talk about pivoting, because a lot of people are faced with this necessity to pivot. It's either pivot or die. And when I say pivot, that means put down the hammer potentially that you've been swinging, stop driving that particular nail that you've been driving for the last however many years, and look at some other problems that you may have to solve. So in my career, I've had to pivot from business owner to employee to from building construction to the sewer rehabilitation industry because I had a family to take care of and I had to pivot, and I found myself in unusual situations. And I think a lot of people right now are in that position. So let's talk about pivoting and how to think about pivoting. So let's take I'll ask you, what's one of the worst case geographies and trades right now where somebody could just be completely shut down? And then let's talk about how they might think about pivoting.
Geography, I would say, are you talking state? Like where are we? Yeah, I would say the worst that I've heard so far is Pennsylvania. Michigan's in there as well. There's plenty of other people that I'm not mentioning, but Pennsylvania has been in it the longest. And the remodeling business is, high volume, high turn projects inside people's houses where they're still living there. It's just shut down. So
let's say we're talking to a hypothetical remodeler in Michigan. They do kitchens and baths, and their customers are in lockdown. Customers wouldn't want them in their home anyway. It's probably illegal. And let's say in Michigan, the restrictions are very stringent. The employees are stuck at home. What would you do in that situation if you're a business owner? How would you start to think about pivoting to keep this business alive? Let's just riff on that a little bit. I don't have the answers. This is not a prepared script, right. But let's riff on that a little bit.
I think that there's two different answers in my mind that jump out. And the first one is, do you have a PPP? Can you pay two months, 8 weeks, whatever, your payroll based on revenues or lack of revenue, but government assistance? That's a totally different answer, right? Because if you have that resource available to you, to me, I hear a lot of conversation like, well, I'm just going to pay people to stay home. And the answer is yes. It's exactly what you're going to do because you're keeping your team in place. And that's taking the view that we're going to be able to get through this. And that's looking at a little bit of math and a little bit of graphs and a little bit of science and a little bit of hope that says that, yeah, in 8 weeks, we should be somewhere where, things are going to start to come out. It's doing that around the world. And that's taking the view that while we're not able to work in someone's home, we're going to do what we've always wanted to do, which is make our business better, is work on our business. And you may have a carpenter that you may not put a lot of stock in his ability to schedule a project, but that doesn't mean that you can't put a working group together of 2 or 3 or 4 people, depending on the size of your staff, that says, hey guys, this week, I want you to take our kitchen and bath schedules and I want you to get in the real weeds on them. I want you to say, hey, what's the thing that always goes wrong with our schedules? What's the thing we always miss in our bids? There was a project where we missed 3 times in a row, all the porta-johns. Why did we miss that? Because it wasn't on our template. Create the documentation, whether it's, obviously in CoConstruct, if you've got templates you can create, but if you don't use CoConstruct, you use a spreadsheet or you use something else, a Google Calendar. Go through there with a fine-tooth comb with your staff that you're paying to stay home. Use Zoom, use the tools that are available, and get them together and have them meet. Have your office staff do what in CoConstruct I call an admin project, which is taking all the peripheral information from around your office, the 3-ring binders that say how to get your permits, and the spreadsheet or whatever that you have to fill out for the total number of BTUs for your gas application. Put all that stuff into one place so you can, when you hit the ground running, hopefully at the end of 8 weeks or sooner, and this tidal wave potentially of business that we should be preparing for comes, that you have systems in place and something that you can fall in on, and you've sharpened your saw, as everybody says, in the downtime. So that's one scenario, right? Does that make sense from
Yeah,
your perspective?
absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. My advice for folks would be, I think it starts from your perspective. How, if you're thinking about tomorrow, if you're only thinking about the next 24 hours, then you're not going to see much value in sharpening the saw. You're not going to see
Right.
much value in putting systems in place. But if you look a little further out and you look at 6 weeks down the road and you believe that you're going to survive this thing, or at least to give yourself a fighting chance of of being able to survive this thing, then you're going to start thinking, okay, when I come out of this, then we'll have systems in place. Here's another wrinkle. Another way to look at that is there's going to be a lot of self-fulfilling prophecies, I think, over the next couple of months. There are going to be people who say, you know what, why bother sharpening the saw? Why bother putting these systems in place? Because it's not going to help anyway. I probably won't be in business. And you know what? That could become a self-fulfilling prophecy.
It will. I mean, it will. You gotta pick yourself up and put your big contractor pants on and get to work. I mean, it's even if the PPP doesn't come through. I mean, this is a drastic situation again. So, maybe there's one person out there or one contracting company that this applies to. And I apologize if you're doing great, but that one person's got to hear this. If you want to be in business at the end of this, you can be in business at the end of this, but you got to get dead on to negotiating and making hard decisions. Like, if you don't get the PPP, if there's no way for you to bring in revenue, if you do not have resources available, then you need to cut. And you need to let your staff go with a very empathetic, meaningful conversation with each one of them individually, and say, listen, there's nothing we can do right now, but I'm cutting you to put you on unemployment so that you and your family can have food. And we all need to make these negotiations and do the things we need to do to make it, to survive. And when this company is able to open its doors, I want you back. And I just want to be clear. Now, you run a risk of that, obviously, when you let someone go. It's that whole saying, right? If you love someone, set them go. And if they return, whatever. And if they don't, hunt them down, whatever. I don't know. But you know what I'm saying, right? Like, you have got to make a hard decision right now. If you are going to stay in business and you don't get the funding, then you need to make some decisions that will mean the survival of your company. And that might be, forbearance on some loans. That might be giving a truck back to the bank. I mean, it's some crap stuff that you're going to have to deal with. But if you want your business to continue afterwards, you've got to make those drastic cuts to survive. And that's unfortunate. There's no My Little Pony and rainbows here. That's just real stuff.
There may not be a good outcome here, but there could be a less bad outcome.
That's correct.
And I think the operative word there is decision. Yeah. You've got to make a decision. If you are going to wait to see, if you're going to let the survival of your business and your hopes and dreams depend on the government or the SBA or the competition or your clients or whatever, then that's a bit of a cop-out. So what you need to do right now, if you're not sure, is make a decision. So if you're dealing with anxiety, which we all are, let's be honest, we're all dealing with some level of anxiety. One of the best things that I've ever heard is that the antidote to anxiety is a definite decision backed up by a definite plan. So when you make a decision and you decide what you're going to do and you start doing that, you'll be amazed at what happens to the anxiety level. It goes down dramatically. Now, some of this could be delusional, but you know what? I mentioned a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you don't make a decision and you wait, then if you don't think you're going to succeed, you're probably right. But if you decide that you're going to succeed, there's a pretty good chance that you will, because you burn the ships, you take away plan B. And sometimes that's that's what you have to do. I did a podcast on this a few months ago on the death ground strategy or the desperate ground strategy. And sometimes having no options is the best thing. And that means you may need to take some options away, take some options off the table, and just freaking decide that you're going to get through this thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. I mean, that's, there's an old saying from the Korean War that Jesse Puller said that, we're surrounded on all sides. We could attack in any direction, right? You just got to start plugging away and making those decisions. And what happens, and I've been there, like been overwhelmed with like the massive weight of the decisions that needed to be made. And when I made a decision, no matter how bad the outcome was that I was heading towards, I knew that if I did one thing now, then another thing, and then another thing, it became more manageable, right? Because it's not nebulous. It's not this amorphous thing hanging over you. It might be bad, like I have to let people go, but you can say, what's the checklist of things in my mind I need to go through? I need to do some HR things. I need to do some research. I need to look at what it's going to be like to bring people back on board and how I do that. So you start to like literally be able to sleep again, which is important. The one thing we talked about a couple of days ago when we were talking is, and if you're in that situation, if you're in a hole, you put the shovel away, right? Stop digging, and don't make it deeper or worse.
Yeah, that was something I was guilty of. Was I had dug myself into a hole, and I kept getting bigger shovels, shinier shovels, different shovels. And somebody said that if you find yourself in a hole, put the shovel down. And I realized I got myself into this. Yep. And the quote that comes to mind is from Chris Gardner, the guy whose story was on The Pursuit of Happiness. I think it was The Pursuit of Happiness, the Will Smith movie. Yep. He was a homeless guy that ended up being a stockbroker. He had this moment where he was in a subway public restroom with his son. He's homeless, looking in this mirror, which isn't really a mirror. It's a piece of polished stainless steel because it's in a public restroom. And he kept asking himself, how did I get here? How did I get here? Why am I here? How did I get into this situation? And he finally said, I drove here. And as soon as he took ownership of how he got there, and he realized that he got himself into that situation, then he had the power to get himself out. Yeah. So personally, I blamed a lot of people for the mistakes that I made, the economy, the competition, my business partner. But you know what? It was on me. I drove myself there. Yeah. And we'll talk about some of the lessons learned. But the reason that things are bad right now, you may not want to hear this if you're listening, but the reason you're in a bad situation right now is because you didn't do things to prepare. You thought things would always be the way they are, and you just weren't ready. So, and
surprised, like it's, you think that things are just going to continue to go on the way they always have. And man, it doesn't work that way.
Not everything you touch turned to gold. And we were on, you were on FailCon last week, where we talked about a lot of the leading indicators that led up to our biggest mistakes, which we're not going to get into that. But some of the reasons that there are reasons that we are in this situation. If you're in a bit of a crisis, there are some things that are out of your control, and there are some things that are in your control. And it's always best to focus your energy and brain power on things that you can control and forget about the rest. So let's talk about some of the lessons from the recession. And ultimately, what are some lessons we can take away from this right now while there's time, before we get too busy again? What are some of the lessons that will help people recession-proof their business for the next time? And there will be a next time.
Yeah.
Maybe we don't know what it's going to be, but what are some of those lessons in your opinion?
The first one that I've got that comes to mind is going to sound a little weird coming from a marine builder, but it's write it down. Like right now, if you don't want to use the term journaling, make a notebook or a binder of knowledge, or experience or wisdom or whatever you want to call it. But there is no better teacher than the things that we're going through right now. And I'm a builder who was too busy, all day, every day, including the weekends. And I found myself, in order to find the peace and quiet and silence that I needed to think, I had to get up early. And now I get up at 5. I used to get up earlier than that as a builder, but I get up at 5 and I spend time thinking and writing down the things that I'm learning each day and the problems that I have. And so I know that sounds like new age and all that to some people, but you would just not believe the wealth of knowledge that you process every day in your own mind. And if you put it down, whether it's your chief of operations who might buy the company from you, or whether it's your son or daughter that might take over the company from you, or maybe it's just you 5, 6, 10 years from now, when something else happens, you can page through that manual and look at the lessons. Where was I in terms of cash? What were the things I was concerned about? What were the solutions? What did I explore? What was my timing? And then always follow up your thoughts with what were the lessons learned from each one of those decisions? I know it seems like you don't have time, but it's such a big pay it forward, effort that you could do, and it will help you current and future. It will help you process, and it will help you document, and it will help people learn from the things that you're going through. So write it down, and in life, isn't this true? After you've been through something and time passes, it heals a lot of the wounds. It rounds off those rough, sharp edges of our memory, right? Don't round off those edges when you're writing. Write the brutal pain that you're feeling and the decision, the angst that you have, so that it comes out in the future when people are looking and seeking wisdom from your experience right now. So get a good notebook and make something out of it.
Definitely. Ray Dalio wrote a book called Principles, and he is one of the wealthiest individuals on the planet.
Yeah.
And his brain works like a computer, essentially. But this book, which is it's a monster of a book, but it's just
it's right there. It's right there.
It's like 2 inches thick.
Yeah.
But it is full of principles that he and his organization have gleaned from that. And I think they have a corporate document. There may be a corporate document where people have the opportunity to submit, hey, here's a great learning, here's a nugget to put in that file, what a great idea for a business. Let's have this bucket for capturing wisdom.
Yeah.
And let's encourage our people to come up with smart principles. How can we?
And if you think doing it in paper is too fluffy, drinking some coffee and breaking out the calligraphy marker or whatever, just put it on your phone. You can talk to your notes file on iPhones and, all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
There's all kinds of applications, a Google Doc or something like that, something that you can just keep. And, when you have that spark of inspiration, or you have that experience giving you wisdom, talk about it or write it down, just document it.
Definitely. And there are people, some of you are listening thinking, I don't have time for that shit.
Yeah.
Well, I guarantee in 6 weeks, you're going to say, I'm too busy for that. And here's the reality. You're never going to think you have time for it. Yeah. You will always think there's something more important to do. But your decision is, am I going to get better? Or am I going to go around this mountain again and keep running into the same mistake? So you mentioned pay it forward. This might be paying it forward to somebody else, but it could be paying it forward to yourself in 6 months or a year.
Yeah. Right.
So it's not an entirely altruistic effort. It's a good thing for yourself. So that's great advice. Take some time, write down what's going on. I had a conversation this morning with one of my clients about, hey, the assumption is that things will, when we extrapolate our current situation, it will always be the way it is right now. And everybody took the puzzle pieces about 4 weeks ago and just threw them up into the air, and it's a whole different ballgame. So it's a great time to look at your contract terms, your change control process, your policies and procedures, all of these things. And now's a good time to say, hey, here's the disruption that happened.
Yep.
and this is what I thought it was going to be, but this is what I learned. So great advice. Great time
Yep.
to do some reflection. What else?
Well, one thing you said there's all these things out of our control, right? And they are. There's so many things always out of our control, even more so now. The one thing we have control of is how we react to all these things, right? Ourselves. And boy, am I guilty of this. Like, I'm saying this because I live it like every day. How, like you said, we're all stressed, right? And how do you react to the inputs of your life, the things that are coming at you faster than you can process them? And are you able to effectively put time in between that input and your response? And that, in my mind, your ability to just recognize there needs to be a gap between that input, especially now, and the response that you shoot back that email, or you fire off a text, or you drop the F-bomb on somebody just because you're upset. Whether it's because your kids are running around the house and you ran out of duct tape and you can't shut them up, or whether it's a client or an employee, make sure that you're giving yourself some space between input and response. And because you are in control of yourself, even though it seems like it's so hard to control, that's really the only thing you can. That's a side note piece of advice just based off of that statement. But
No, I think that's great advice, because the revelation that you control your response and that you are in control of your emotions is sort of foundational to being able to decide how you're going to respond to things.
yeah,
If you don't believe, if you believe that you are a function of your circumstances, your environment, the economy, and you have no control over it, then you will just be blown around like an emotional tumbleweed, and you will never be able to take ownership of that. So I think that's a great thing to riff on. There are lots of things right now that people can't control.
mm-hmm.
So here's something this is going to be like a hard left turn, potentially. Has nothing to do with business, but in reality, it kind of has everything to do with it. So here are a few things you can control. And here are a few things I think will set a good baseline, or at least they have for me and a lot of the people that I work with. So if you want to set a good baseline for yourself, a good mental baseline, there's a couple of things. One is gratitude. So when I work with somebody who's upset, anxious, they're in crisis mode, the first thing I typically get them to start doing is a habit, which is completely counterintuitive and frankly pisses some people off, is take a few minutes every day and just write down 3 things you're grateful for.
Yeah.
It will eventually rewire your brain to start looking for the positive things.
Mm-hmm.
So
you can't be angry while you're being grateful. That's proven.
It is physically impossible to be angry while grateful, anxious, scared while grateful. It releases brain chemicals, touchy-feely, fuzzy-wuzzy, feel-good brain chemicals that, frankly, drugs and alcohol tend to replicate. But so if you want to set a good baseline, here's 3 things I'll say. 1, gratitude. Start focusing on the good things you're grateful for. Number 2, control what you eat. This is a little bit counterintuitive, but the food you're eating could get you into this downward spiral of anxiety. So processed foods, sugar, lots of bread, there are pathogen-filled foods that are attacking your body. They're basically waging chemical warfare in your body that's causing your immune system to become fatigued, your adrenal system becomes fatigued, and not to get into a lot of details, but you get into a downward spiral. So gratitude, food, and then sleep. Those are 3 things that you should have 100% control of. I've never had anybody shove food in my mouth against my will. Now, I've had kids wake me up in the middle of the night, but do your best to get a good night's sleep, because that puts you into a downward spiral as well. So anything else you would add to that list, like things that you're completely in control of that will help in these uncertain times?
That gratitude piece is huge, right? And I know, listen, I hope everyone doesn't think we're going to sell a bunch of essential oils at the end of this conversation, because we're
Oh,
not.
let me make a note of that. Not to mention.
But it's just, this stuff is so true, and it really is impactful. The gratitude piece. It's like you wake up in the morning, you may be stuck in your house, or maybe only able to go out into your neighborhood and walk around, but just be thankful that you're there. And that does so much for your mindset. And I will tell you that I don't know when it was, but in one of the deepest, darkest times of my home building life and career, I had some really bad things happening because the economy was just driving everybody out of business. And I had a good friend of mine flying from Chicago, and really, really good architect, and ended up working with him up in Chicago for a long time. But he came and sat down at my kitchen table, flew in, and he said, Spencer, things are not good. You have to recognize that it always seems like it's worse than it really is. So take solace in that. And I know that's easy to say, but it's true. And boy, was that true. And he said, but next we're going to get in the car and we're going to go to Panera Bread and get you some food. He said, because you can't stop eating. You can't, I was just racking my brain trying to figure out ways out of different holes and minefields and so on. And he said, let's go. You got to eat, and you got to stay eating. So I can't emphasize that enough. And the sleep thing just speaks for itself. No one out here is a superhuman. If you're not getting enough sleep, and I still probably don't get enough sleep, because there's no way I'm sleeping 8 hours or 9 hours a night, nor do I think I actually can. But you to understand your body, to be able to benefit from the rest that your brain gets while you're sleeping, you've got to sleep, and that will help things look clearer the next day. So
good stuff.
Good, really solid list of stuff there.
Let's talk about, I want to talk about hard targeting in just a minute, hard targeting against failure. But before we get into that, what are some destructive behaviors, self-destructive behaviors to avoid right now when things are bad?
Yeah.
And
yeah. I mean,
I'll go first, because
okay.
I have a good list of self-destructive behaviors that I've recognized.
Yeah.
So avoidance.
Yeah, no doubt.
Avoidance doesn't work. You don't get to choose if you deal with a tough situation. You just get to choose how big and ugly and messy it is by the time you deal with it.
Yeah.
Another self-destructive behavior is isolation. This is one that I dealt with. I can remember being at my youngest daughter's preschool graduation, and just I don't know what it was. This was a few years after I folded up my business, and I just wanted to get out of there. Being in a room full of people, I just felt completely isolated. I felt ashamed, and I just felt like everybody in the room knew what I had done and what had happened to me. And the reality was that very few of them probably did. But my inner critic was telling me lots of things that just told me to isolate and just go get away from people, stay away from family, stay away from people, just isolate. And nothing good comes from isolation.
That's right. You got to face it. You have to get out there.
Yeah. What about you? What are some behaviors or things to avoid when things are not going well?
Yeah. So, there's a few. I would say that I am inclined towards fixing problems, right? Like, I think that I can fix all the problems. And so what happens when things start to spiral is I go into work mode, and I may work 12, 15, 18, 20 hours in a day to try to push through a problem, and everything else goes away. It's no exercise. The family, you say, hey, I've got to go in my office and I got to fix something, and I just need some time. And so the dog walks, the interaction, all that. The pendulum can swing in business, right? It can go back and forth, and you can work really hard and not work really hard, and the effect is less. But when that pendulum swings in everything else, it's much more impactful, right? Your family time, everyone gets impacted. Those are things that it's hard to claw back if you've damaged them. So be careful of that, right? So you have to stay balanced as much as you can. There's surge, no doubt, but there's balance still. You have to continue to exercise. You have to try to eat well. You have to try to get that sleep. It's what's necessary so you can push through on the other stuff, right? And of course, what's the thing that we haven't mentioned yet is like, hey, I'm under a lot of pressure to calm my nerves, break out the Woodford Reserve. Definitely not saying don't break out the Woodford Reserve. That's helpful, in moderation though. But don't go overboard on it. Sometimes you need to sit down, and wife, husband, family members or whatever, and just relax. And if you find relaxation is in conversation and you have a beverage with that, then that's good. But if you sit in the corner and you drink a fifth of Jack by yourself to try to drown your problems, it only makes it worse. It only makes it worse. So, and that avoidance thing that you mentioned, I've been there too. Boy, I've been like, oh, I'm going to put this presentation together for the bank to try to get out of trouble, but I'm going to take a nap first because I'm really tired.
Exactly.
I'm a grown ass man, and I can admit that I've done that. But not healthy for sure, but real. So that's stuff to take care of too. Just make sure that you're sleeping so you don't feel like you need to take a nap, so you can jump on stuff and eat the frog when you need to.
Definitely. All right. Let's talk about how to hard target your business against failure. First of all, what does that mean? And then what are a few things people can do to hard target their business against failure?
So hard targeting is a term that I bring from the military, from the Marine Corps specifically. When we used it, it was a scenario where, if you go to a different country and you land your Marines on the ground, you don't want to put them out in the open and make it just easy for people to harm them. You want to create a hard target. A good example is if you're traveling from one place in a country to another, don't always go the same route. Go a different route. Mix it up a little bit, which means that if someone's observing you and you're always doing the same path, it's easy to impact you or do whatever negative actions they want to take against you. So in any case, when you shift hard targeting to your business, it means when a financial hiccup, when that something goes wrong in the middle of the night that impacts your business, or the next pandemic happens, hard targeting for failure is making sure that you're looking ahead, thinking about very similarly to your personal finances, whatever the number is of the day. Do you have 3 months worth of expenses in the bank and savings so you can survive? Is it with a business? Do you have a full year worth of cash in the bank that you can survive at some diminished capacity maybe, but that all of your obligations, including your family's obligations, can be met without complete catastrophic failure? Have the systems and processes in place that you can immediately fall over and into, that will help you get through, like the checklist when something goes wrong in an aircraft. What do you do? What buttons do you flick? What information do you immediately pull? Those are the things that are hard targeting. And that matches up well with something I call an immediate action drill, right? So part of hard targeting your company is having these processes in place, which I essentially called an immediate action drill when something goes wrong. What is that thing that triggers a response, and what is the response? Next pandemic, people are locked into their house. You break out. Your immediate action to do is shut down your social media so you can assess the situation and you're not tone deaf. Hoard cash, get your AR paid, talk to your banks, talk to your staff, look at what the conditions are. What are the risks that could be coming with this? Thinking ahead, that's your job as a business owner or as an operator of a business, is to put these immediate action drills in place, so that like we've talked about, as a component of hard targeting for failure. So that's what I mean when I say that. And mean, there's so many different paths that you can go down in that part of the conversation, but in general, it's making sure that you're prepared and that that you're not easily, blown in the wrong direction by the next puff of negative wind that comes down towards you.
Yeah, and frankly, everybody is one phone call away from a local pandemic or a local recession. So
Yep.
it's good to have some evergreen immediate action drills in place for what if a key employee gets injured? What if, here's a big one, what if you get injured? What if you as the business owner are incapacitated?
Yeah.
Then what happens?
Yeah. Who has key man insurance out here?
Right.
I always had key man insurance, I still do, that would pay all of the loans that the business had and pay my mortgage off. That's just something you should consider, especially for your family or for the continuity of your business.
So if somebody's thinking, oh my gosh, I am completely unprepared right now, where should they start? Because there are 100 different situations you can come up with. How would you advise somebody to think about which scenarios they should start with to put in place some immediate action drills?
I think you have to start with the money. You have to, this goes back to what are those lessons learned, and we talked about writing it down. But another one of the lessons that I took away from 2008, and I've seen so acutely and so immediately here, is that you need to know your numbers, and if you don't know your numbers, now's the time to get acquainted. And that's what I would say is the thing that you should be focused on. That's where to start, is figure out what your QuickBooks or your accounting system looks like, and figure out what your P&L and your balance sheet really is, instead of just those numbers that they produce around tax time when you hope that it's zero or as close to zero so you don't have to pay more taxes. Figure out what your numbers are. And I think the real litmus test on that, and the proof of that as a concept that people should be focused on, is of the hundreds of builders that I've talked to in the last 3 weeks, and I don't know if it's more than hundreds at this point, the ones who have an account open and who are getting their PPP funded or have already gotten it funded are the ones that knew their numbers, turned a report around, and were able to answer questions quickly and authentically, and had confidence in their numbers. And so that would be that next place that I would tell people to start moving on.
Yeah. So some of the lessons we talked about, you just mentioned, know your numbers. It's imperative. Maybe when things are great, you don't think you need to know your numbers, but the reality is you do. So at all times, you need to know your numbers, especially in crisis mode. Write down some of these lessons, some of the key learnings. What are some other lessons that people should be considering right now in the midst of this situation?
Well, I would say that it's like the next phase of what we just talked about. Once you've got your money figured, your numbers, is, do you have processes in place? Are you process driven, or are you people driven? If your business is people driven, then every time you interact with a different person or a different personality, everything changes. It's very nebulous, right? There's like no confidence in how you move from first contact to a customer all the way through finish, because it's very people driven. If you're process driven, your process looks the same, throughout. It's like, this is what we do first, this is what we do 10th, and these are the steps in between. And it's time to, get on our horse, and we're going to go on this path, and you can ride along. And so you can define that. But if you have a process, unless you have a system to connect it all, like a backbone to attach it to, you can't really manage the process. So after you've got your money figured out, know what your processes are, and then figure out how to hook them into a system that allows you to repeat it and allows you to fall onto it. Again, I say fall onto it, it's like fall into it as just an action that you take whenever something happens. There should be, and realistically, there should be, if you've got a good process and a good system, there should be no difference between the good times and the bad times. You don't operate differently. The numbers might be different, but the fundamental blocking and tackling of your day-to-day activities with your customers and your staff shouldn't modify based on things out of your control. you might just have to take longer, or there might be a dead stop in the middle of it, but it's not like you're scrambling to try to figure out, well, okay, how do we do what's next? You know what's next because it's part of your process that's defined in your system.
Yeah, I call that having a system of systems. A lot of businesses have various systems, whether they're technology or not, or they're written on a legal pad, or they're in somebody's head. They have systems. So having a system that all of your systems live on is key. And especially now, we're talking about anxiety and emotions and fear. If you have a people-centric business, then wow, you're going to get very different results. But if you have a process-driven business, then maybe the people operating the processes are a little emotional, but they have something to follow. And I would say the results are going to be a lot more consistent than the people-driven business. So good stuff. Know your numbers, write down your lessons, decide if you're going to be process or people-driven, and then have a backbone for your systems to live on, so you have some consistency. Yeah, good stuff.
We're seeing a lot of people realize that right now because of all the, even we're on a Zoom call here, people are realizing. And I had a remodeler, this is a separate remodeler in Philadelphia, who said, I've always gone out and done my sales calls with clients first touch. And it was a 4-hour evolution between travel and setup and thinking and doing this and presenting and coming home. And he goes, I just did one in 45 minutes. So I'm never going to do this again. I'm going to have my first, dressing down of are you real or not conversation just like this, and save myself 3 more hours. And so we're seeing a lot of people realizing that they need a system. They need something that they can use decentralized, that their whole staff is. It's just crazy the number of people signing up. It's I've never not seen it, but it's great because people are starting to realize that you do need something that can help you define your business process. So,
great stuff.
Yeah,
all right.
I do have another one. I got another one.
Yeah, go ahead.
And this is one that, and you're just thinking about this, big takeaway is seek out people that are either experts in the things that you're not, or someone that you can seek advice from, right? So, and the important part of that is, there's plenty of people in your circle, in your sphere, that have the answers to the things that you don't, but you need to invest in that relationship before you need it, right? So, find the people during the good times that you think you're going to need to lean on for advice, for safe haven. Maybe you have an investor who you want to do business with. Well, make an investment in that relationship when times are good, so that when it hits the fan, that you have someone to fall on and rely on and kind of get advice from as the timing needs it. So
yeah, that's really good advice. And to jump off that, you don't have to do this alone. There are people that can and will help you. Talk to other people, talk to builders. Frankly, one of the biggest benefits of CoConstruct is the community. And I went to CoCon in November, and the community, it was like a bunch of builders who really liked the community and they used the software. So I think, frankly, people get, I don't know which is more valuable. Maybe it's sometimes the software, sometimes the community, but it's lonely being a builder. Yeah. I hear this all the time.
It's lonely at the top, right? It's lonely at the top, as they say, especially as an owner. And that's the thing I dreamed about as a builder, was what we've been able to accomplish at CoConstruct, which is it's a group of people that have a similar interest, right? They're all speaking the same language, the business process language, because they're all using CoConstruct. But you get together, and there's thousands of people on the community online, and the things that they're sharing are crazy. Like, hey, how are you dealing with this? We had people sharing letters to customers about COVID-19. And they were just like, oh, that's great. I saw that in the webinar. Can you send that to me? And they were sending it and sharing. They're sharing templates. They're sharing contracts, things like that. It's really heartening to see people coming together that are in the same types of businesses from different parts of the country, all sharing. That's been the juice that has been really good to squeeze, in this downturn and see the everyone coming together to do that.
Yeah. And you don't have to do it alone. You don't have to figure this stuff out alone. There are people you can commiserate with, people that will encourage you, people you can help with. So fight isolation, get into some sort of a community. So talk about CoConstruct for a few minutes. For folks who aren't familiar with it, what is it? And then how might it help them? What exactly is CoConstruct?
So CoConstruct is a software. It's internet based, so it's web based, but it also has a mobile app that I call it the best business practice for home builders and remodelers. It's everything you need in your company from first touch all the way through warranty in one place. You have templates that have all of your specifications in them. It has all of your budgets in them. You can do estimating through bidding, and if you do purchase orders there, there's 27 or 28 different features in CoConstruct right now that handle pretty much every piece of the project management aspect of your business, but also can be utilized to handle the administrative side of your business as well. It's a place where when I first started using CoConstruct as a builder 10 years ago, or it's over 10 years now, it was because I needed a place to document the selections, all these decisions, the complexity of my projects with my customers, but also to be able to communicate it in one spot with my customers, my trade partners, my suppliers, and my own team. So that's the core of CoConstruct, is this ability to communicate complexity, but the ability for CoConstruct to talk two ways to QuickBooks, to talk to Xero, and it gives you this ability to pull one page project cost accounting for an entire project, where you can see everything that you budgeted, all the actuals against your budget, how you're gonna finish the project out, all in real time. So it's all of the things that you need to run a construction business, a residential contracting business at least, and in a big community to boot, and a bunch of really awesome people that really care about builders and remodelers and their success. So that's CoConstruct.
Great stuff. And I know it's designed for residential contractors, builders and remodelers, but I can tell you, I wish I had it years ago for the commercial work that I did. So
yeah, we have plenty of commercial guys. We have road builders. We have pool contractors, landscape contractors. It's really, if you've got a complex project that has money associated with it and a client that you need to communicate with, and you need to do budgets and estimating, that's it. You can use it.
It's pretty agnostic when it comes to what's being built, but it tracks everything. It's good.
Yeah.
Stuff, so.
We've got about $21 billion worth of stuff being built in it today. It's amazing.
It's a few projects. I'll have a link. If you're interested, if you're listening and you want to find out more about it, I'll have a link at the end of this podcast where you can go check it out, find out some more details, and then I might even have some goodies for you that I'll throw in if you end up signing up. So Spencer, I know you got to run. This has been fantastic. Thanks for being so generous with your time, for everything that you're doing right now for the industry, all the webinars, for being on this podcast. You're one of the most generous guys that I know. And frankly, everybody in the building industry is fortunate to have somebody like you out there pumping out good stuff. So thanks a lot.
Thank you, Todd. Thanks for hosting this and what you're doing with your customers as well.
If you want to find out more about CoConstruct and systematizing your business and having a platform that frankly helps you run your entire business, it's a pretty smart move. All right. This is the first step that I advise most of my contractor clients that I work with, is to have a tool, have a system like CoConstruct. And if you are a builder or a remodeler, or quite frankly, whatever kind of work you're doing, CoConstruct is going to help you. And if you want to find out more about it and take advantage of some bonuses that CoConstruct will throw in for you as the Construction Leading Edge podcast listener, then listen up for this link. Go to constructionleadingedge.com /CoConstruct, CoConstruct, constructionleadingedge.com /CoConstruct, and check that out. If you don't have a system in place, it will be an absolute game changer. Simply being able to do scheduling, being able to communicate with your trade partners, being able to track, if all you did was track your specs and selections with your clients, it's worth more than what it's going to cost you. It's an absolute no-brainer. All right, so check that out. If you want to offload your bookkeeping headaches, then I recommend that you talk to my friends over at the Apparatus team. You can go to constructionleadingedge.com/headache to send them your information and request a time for a phone call with them. This is a great thing to do right now to get your books in order. You need to have a system in place, and you need to have good financial visibility, and that is a good match. It's a good pair right there. A good 1-2 punch is CoConstruct and the Apparatus team. As always, I appreciate you listening. I appreciate the ratings and the reviews. If you could take a moment and share a rating or a review, or share this podcast with somebody that would get some value out of it, I would appreciate it, and I think they would as well. As always, if you have any questions, you can, if you're not in a position to email right now, but you can text, let me give you a number. You can send me a text. Let me know what you're looking for, and I'll get that information into your hands. The number to text is 859-667-2015. Let me know what you're looking for, and I'll get that information to you as well. As always, you can go to constructionleadingedge.com. That's my website. Schedule a free call. We can talk about profit bleeds, or if you just need to talk to somebody about what's going on right now, I'd be happy to help out. There's usually some time on my calendar to do that, and I would be glad to help out if that would be beneficial to you. Take advantage of that, and I will see you next time. Thanks.